Day 6, 11:22 p.m. I landed on loose stones and half stumbled, half slid down the slope toward the cave entrance. The thumping of the helicopter blades above us was loud. May was right beside me, but I could hardly see her in the thick dust. There were no Ricky figures anywhere in sight. We came to the cave entrance and stopped. May pulled out the thermite capsules. She gave me the magnesium fuses. She tossed me a plastic cigarette lighter. I thought, that's what we're using? Her face was already partially clouded behind the mask. Her eyes were hidden behind the night vision goggles. She pointed to the interior of the cave. I nodded. She tapped me on the shoulder, pointed to my goggles. I didn't understand, so she reached forward by my cheek and flicked a switch. Me now, she said. Yes, I hear. Okay then, let's go. We started into the cave. The green glowing had vanished in the thick dust. We had only the infrared light mounted on top of our night vision goggles. We saw no figures. We heard nothing but the thumping of the helicopter. But as we went deeper into the cave, the sound began to fade. And as the sound faded, so did the wind. May was focused. She said, "Bobby, do you hear me?" "Yes, I hear you." "Get your ass in here." "I'm trying to." "Don't try. Get in here, Bobby." I shook my head. If I knew Bobby Lambeck, he was never coming into this pit. We rounded the bend and saw nothing but suspended dust. The vague outlines of cave walls. The walls seemed smooth here, with no place to hide. Then, from the gloom directly ahead, I saw a Ricky figure emerged. He was expressionless, just walking toward us. Then another figure from the left, and another. The three formed a line. They marched toward us at a steady pace, their faces identical and expressionless. "First lesson," May said, holding out the thermite cap. "Let's hope they don't learn it," I said, and I lit the fuse. It sputtered white-hot sparks. She tossed the cap forward. It landed a few feet in front of the advancing group. They ignored it, staring forward at us. May said, "It's a 3 count. 2, 1, and turn away." I twisted away, ducking my head under my arm, just as a sphere of blinding light filled the tunnel. Even though my eyes were closed, the glare was so strong that I saw spots when I opened my eyes again, and I turned back. May was already moving forward. The dust in the air had a slightly darker tint. I saw no sign of the three figures. Did they run? No. Vaporized, she said. She sounded pleased. "New situations?" I said. I was feeling encouraged. If the programming assumptions still held, the swarms would be weak when reacting to genuinely new situations. In time, they would learn. In time, they would evolve strategies to deal with the new conditions. But initially, their response would be disorganized, chaotic. That was a weakness of distributed intelligence. It was powerful and it was flexible, but it was slow to respond to unprecedented events. "We hope," May said. We came to the gaping hole in the cave floor she had described. In the night goggles, I saw a sort of sloping ramps. 4 or 5 figures were coming up toward us, and there seemed to be more behind. They all looked like Ricky, but many of them were not so well formed, and those in the rear were just swirling clouds. The thrumming sound was loud. Second lesson. May held out a cap. It sizzled right when I lit it. She rolled it gently down the ramp. The figures hesitated when they saw it. Damn, I said. But then it was time to duck away and shield my eyes from the explosive flash. Inside the confined space, there was a war of expanding gas. I felt a burst of intense heat on my back. When I looked again, most of the swarms beneath us had vanished, but a few hung back apparently undamaged. They were learning fast. Next lesson, May said, holding 2 caps this time. I lit both, and she rolled one and threw the second one deeper down the ramp. The explosions roared simultaneously, and a huge gust of hot air rolled upward past us. My shirt caught fire. May pounded it out with a flat of her hand, smacking me with rapid strokes. When we looked again, there were no figures in sight, and no dark swarms. We went down the ramp, heading deeper into the cave. We had started with 25 thermite caps. We had 21 left, and we had gone only a short distance down the ramp toward the large room at the bottom. May moved quickly now. I had to hurry to catch up with her, but her instincts were good. The few swarms that materialized before us all quickly backed away at our approach. We were herding them into the lower room. May said, "Bobby, where are you?" There's a clicked. Try and get. Bobby, come on, damn it. But all the while, we were moving deeper into the cave, and soon we heard only static. Down here, dust hung suspended in the air, diffusing the infrared beams. We could see clearly the walls and ground directly ahead of us, but beyond that, there was total blackness. The sense of darkness and isolation was frightening. I couldn't tell what was on either side of me unless I turned my head, sweeping my beam back and forth. I began to smell that rotten odor again, sharp and nauseating. We were coming to level ground. May stayed calm when a half-dozen swarms buzzed before us. She held out another cap for me to lit. Before I could lit the fuse, the swarms backed off. She advanced at once. Sort of like lion taming, she said. So far, I said. I didn't know how long we could keep this up. The cave was large, much larger than I had imagined. 21 caps didn't seem like enough to get us through it. I wondered if May was worried, too. She didn't seem to be, but probably she wouldn't show it. Something was crunching underfoot. I looked down and saw the floor was carpeted with thousands of tiny, delicate yellow bones, like bird bones, except these were the bones of bats. May was right. They'd all been eaten. In the upper corner of my night vision image, a red light began to blink. It was some kind of warning. Probably the battery. May, I began. Then the red light went out as abruptly as it had begun. What? She said. What is it? Never mind. And then at last we came to the large central chamber. Except there was no central chamber, at least not anymore. Now the huge space was filled from floor to ceiling with an array of dark spheres, about 2 feet in diameter, and bristling with spiky protrusions. They looked like enormous sea urchins. They were stacked in large clusters. The arrangement was orderly. May said, "Is this what I think it is?" Her voice was calm, detached, almost scholarly. "Yeah, I think so." I said, "Unless I was wrong, these spiked clusters were an organic version of the fabrication plant that Xymos had built on the surface. This is how they reproduce." I moved forward. "I don't know if we should go in," she said. "We have to, May. Look at it. It's ordered. You think there's a center? Maybe. And if there was, I wanted to drop thermite on it." I continued onward. Moving among the clusters was an eerie sensation. Thick, mucus-like liquid dripped from the tips of the spikes, and the spheres seemed to be coated with a kind of thick gel that quivered, making the whole cluster seem to be moving, alive. I paused to look more closely. Then I saw that the surface of the spheres really was alive. Crawling within the gel were masses of twisting black worms. Jesus! "They were here before," she said calmly. "What?" "The worms. They were living in the layer of guano on the cave floor. When I came here before, they eat organic material and excrete high-content phosphorus compounds. And now they are involved in swarm synthesis." I said, "That didn't take long, just a few days. Co-evolution in action. The spheres probably provide food and collect their excretions in some way." "Or collect them," May said dryly. "Yeah, maybe. It wasn't inconceivable. Ants raised aphids the way we raised cows. Other insects grew fungus in gardens for food." We moved deeper into the room. The swarm swirled on all sides of us, but they kept their distance. Probably another unprecedented event. I thought, intruders in the nest. They hadn't decided what to do. I moved carefully. The floor was now increasingly slippery in spots. There was a kind of thick muck on the ground. In a few places it glowed streaky green. The streaks seemed to go inward toward the center. I had the sense that the floor sloped gently downward. "How much farther?" May said. She still sounded calm, but I didn't think she was. I wasn't either. When I looked back, I could no longer see the entrance to the chamber, hidden behind the clusters. And then suddenly, we reached the center of the room, because the clusters ended in an open space, and directly ahead, I saw what looked like a miniature version of the mound outside. It was a mound about 4 feet high, perfectly circular, with flat veins extending outward on all sides. It too was streaked with green. Pale smoke was coming off the veins. We moved closer. "It's hot," she said. And it was. The heat was intense. "That's why it was smoking," she said. "What do you think it is in there?" I looked at the floor. I could see now that the streaks of green were running from the clusters down to the central mound. I said, "Assemblers." The spiky urchins generated raw organic material. It flowed to the center, where the assemblers churned out the final molecules. This is where the final assembly occurred. "Then this is the heart," May said. "Yeah, you could say that." The swarms were all around us, hanging back by the clusters. Apparently, they wouldn't come into the center, but they were everywhere around us, waiting for us. "How many you want?" she said quietly, taking the thermite from her pack. I looked around at all the swarms. 5 here," I said. "We'll need the rest to get out." "We can't light 5 at once." "It's all right." I held out my hand. "Give them to me." "But Jack." "Come on, May." She gave me 5 capsules. I moved closer and tossed them unlit into the central mound. The surrounding swarms buzzed, but still did not approach us. "Okay," she said. She understood immediately what I was doing. She was already taking out more capsules. "Now 4, I said. Looking back at the swarms, they were restless, moving back and forth. I didn't know how long they would stay there. 3 for you, 1 for me. You do the swarms. Right." She gave me 1 capsule. I lit the others for her. She threw them back in the direction we had come. The swarms danced away. She counted 3, 2, 1, now. We crouched, ducked away from the harsh blast of light. I heard a cracking sound. When I looked again, some of the clusters were breaking up, falling apart. Spikes were rolling on the ground. Without hesitating, I lit the next capsule, and as it spit white sparks, I tossed it into the central mound. "Let's go." We ran for the entrance. The clusters were crumbling in front of us. May leapt easily over the falling spikes and kept going. I followed her, counting in my mind. 3, 2, 1, now. There was a kind of high-pitched shriek and then a terrific blast of hot gas, a booming detonation, and stabbing pain in my ears. The shock knocked me flat on the ground, sent me skidding forward in the sludge. I felt the spikes sticking in my skin all over my body. My goggles were knocked away, and I was surrounded by blackness. Blackness. I could see nothing at all. I wiped the sludge from my face. I tried to get to my feet, slipped and fell. "May," I said. "May." There was an explosion, she said in a surprised voice. "May, where are you?" I can't see. Everything was pitch black. I could see nothing at all. I was deep in some damn cave, full of spiky things, and I couldn't see. I fought panic. It's all right, May said. In the darkness, I felt her hand gripping my arm. Apparently, she could see me, she said. The flashlight's on your belt. She guided my hand. I fumbled in the darkness, feeling for the clip. I found it, but I couldn't get it open. It was a spring clip, and my fingers kept slipping off. I began to hear a thrumming sound, low at first, but starting to build. My hands were sweating. Finally, the clip opened, and I flicked the flashlight on with a sigh of relief. I saw May in the cold halogen beam. She still had her goggles, and looked away. I strung the beam around the cave. It had been transformed by the explosion. Many of the clusters had broken apart, and the spikes were all over the floor. Some substance on the floor was beginning to burn. Akrid's foul smoke was billowing up. The air was thick and dark. I stepped backward and felt something squishy. I looked down and saw David Brooks' shirt. Then I realized I was standing on what was left of David's torso, which had turned into a kind of whitish jelly. My foot was right in his abdomen. His ribcage scraped against my shin, leaving a white streak on my pants. I looked back and saw David's face, ghostly white and eroded, his features eaten away until he looked as featureless as the faces on the swarms. I felt instant nausea and tasted bile. "Come on," May said, grabbing my arm, squeezing it hard. "Come on, Jack." With a sucking sound, my foot pulled free of the body. I tried to scrape my shoe on the floor, to get clean of the white muck. I was not thinking any more. I was just fighting nausea and an overpowering sense of horror. I wanted to run. Meg was talking to me, but I didn't hear her. I saw only glimpses of the room around me, and was only dimly aware that the swarms were emerging all around us. Swarm after swarm after swarm. They were buzzing everywhere. "I need you, Jack," May said, holding out 4 caps, and somehow fumbling with a flashlight. I managed to light them, and she flung them in all directions. I threw my hands over my eyes as the hot spheres exploded around me. When I looked again, the swarms were gone, but in only a few moments they began to reemerge. First 1 swarm, then 3, then 6, then 10, and then too many to count. They were converging with an angry buzz toward us. "How many caps have we got left?" I said. 8. I knew then that we were not going to make it. We were too deep in the cave. We would never get out. I had no idea how many swarms were around us. My halogen beam swung back and forth across what seemed like an army. "Jack," May said, holding out her hand. She never seemed to lose confidence. I lit 3 more caps, and May threw them, retracing her steps toward the entrance as she did so. I stayed close to her, but I knew our situation was hopeless. Each blast scattered the swarms for just a moment. Then they quickly regrouped. There were far too many swarms. Jack, more thermite in her hands. Now I could see the entrance to the chamber, just a few yards ahead. My eyes were watering from all the acrid smoke. My halogen light was just a narrow beam cutting through the dust. The air was getting thicker and thicker. A final series of right-hot blasts, and we came to the entrance. I saw the ramp leading back toward the surface. I never thought we'd get this far, but I wasn't thinking anymore. Everything was impressions. How many left? I said. May didn't answer me. I heard the rumble of an engine from somewhere above us. Looking up, I saw a wobbling white light in the cave higher up. The rumble became very loud. I heard an engine gunned, and then I saw the ATV poised on the ramp above. Bobby was up there, shouting, "Get out!" May turned and ran up the ramp, and I scrambled to follow her. I was vaguely aware of Bobby lighting, something that burst into orange flames. And then May pushed me against the wall as the riderless ATV roared down the ramp toward the chamber below, with a flaming cloth hanging from its gas tank. It was a motorized Molotov cocktail, coming into an enclosed chamber filled with dust. As soon as it passed, May shoved me hard in the back. "Run!" I sprinted the last few yards up the ramp. Bobby was reaching down for us, hauling us up over the lip to the level above. I fell and scraped my knee, but hardly felt it as he dragged me onto my feet again. Then I was running hard toward the cave entrance, and had almost reached the opening when a fiery blast knocked us off our feet, and I went tumbling through the air, and smashed against one of the cave walls. I got to my feet, head ringing. My flashlight was gone. I heard a kind of strange screaming sound from somewhere behind me, or thought I did. I looked at May and Bobby. They were getting to their feet. With the helicopter still thumping above us, we clambered up the incline and collapsed over the lip of the mound, and tumbled down the slopes, out into the cool black desert night. The last thing I saw was May waving the helicopter away, gesturing for it to go, go, go. And then the cave exploded. The ground jumped beneath my feet, knocking me over. I fell to the ground just as the shock wave caused sharp pain in my ears. I heard the deep rumble of the explosion. From the mouth of the cave, an enormous angry fireball billowed upward, which laced in black. I felt a wave of heat rolling down toward me, and then it was gone, and everything was suddenly quiet, and the world around me was black. How long I lay there beneath the stars, I am not sure. I must have lost consciousness, because the next thing I remember was Bobby pushing me up into the back seat of the helicopter. May was already inside, and she leaned over to buckle me in. They were both looking at me with expressions of concern. I wondered dully if I had been injured. I didn't feel any pain. The door slammed beside me, and Bobby got in the front next to the pilot. We had done it. We had succeeded. I could hardly believe it was over. The helicopter rose into the air, and I saw the lights of the lab in the distance. Pray. Day 7, 12:12 a.m. Jack. Julia rushed towards me as I came down the corridor. In the overhead light, her face looked beautiful in a lean, elegant way. She was in truth more beautiful than I remembered. Her ankle was bandaged, and she had a cast on her wrist. She threw her arms around me and buried her head in my shoulder. Her hair smelled of lavender. Oh, Jack, thank God you're all right. Yeah, I said hoarsely. I'm okay. I'm so glad, so glad. I just stood there, feeling her hug me. Then I hugged her back. I didn't know how to react. She was so energized, but I was exhausted, flat. Are you all right, Jack? She said, still hugging me. Yeah, Julia, I said just above a whisper. I am. What's wrong with you, voice? She said, pulling back to look at me. She scanned my face. What's wrong? He probably burned his vocal cords, May said. She was hoarse too. Her face was blackened with soot. She had a cut on her cheek and another on her forehead. Julia embraced me again. Her fingers touched my shirt. Darling, you're hurt. Just my shirt. Jack, are you sure you're not hurt? I think you're hurt. No, I'm okay. I stepped away from her awkwardly. I can't tell you, she said, how grateful I am for what you did tonight, Jack. What all of you did. She added, turning to the others. You, May, and Bobby, too. I'm only sorry I wasn't here to help. I know this is all my fault, but we are very grateful. The company is grateful. I thought the company, but all I said was, yeah, well, it had to be done. It did, yes, it certainly did. Quickly and decisively, and you did it, Jack. Thank God. Ricky was standing in the background, head bobbing up and down. He was like one of those mechanical birds that drinks from a water glass, bobbing up and down. I felt unreal, as if I was in a play. I think we should all have a drink to celebrate, Julia was saying as we went down the corridor. There must be some champagne around here, Ricky. Is there? Yes. I want to celebrate what you guys have done. I just want to sleep, I said. Oh, come on. Just one glass. It was typical Julia, I thought. Involved in her own world, not noticing how anyone around her was feeling. The last thing any of us wanted to do right now was drink champagne. Thanks anyway, May said, shaking her head. Are you sure? Really? It'd be fun. How about you, Bobby? Maybe tomorrow, Bobby said. Oh well, okay. After all, you're the conquering heroes. We'll do it tomorrow then. I noticed how fast she was talking, how quick her body movements were. I remembered Ellen's comment about taking drugs. It certainly seemed like she was on something. But I was so tired, I just didn't give a damn. I've told the news to Larry Handler, the head of the company, she said, and he's been very grateful to you all. That's nice, I said. Is he going to notify the army? Notify the army? About what? About the runaway experiment. Well, Jack, that's all taken care of now. You've taken care of it. I'm not sure we have, I said. Some of the swarms might have escaped. Or there might be another nest out there. To be safe, I think we should call in the army. I didn't really think we had missed anything, but I wanted to get outsiders in here. I was tired. I wanted somebody else to take over. The army? Julie's eyes flicked to Ricky, then back to me. Jack, you're absolutely right, she said firmly. This is an extremely serious situation. If there is the slightest chance something was missed, we must notify them at once. I mean, tonight. Yes, I agree, Jack. Tonight, in fact, I'll do it right now. I glanced back at Ricky. He was walking along, still nodding in that mechanical way. I didn't get it. What about Ricky's earlier panic? His fear that the experiment would be made public. Now it seemed he didn't care. Julia said, You three can get some sleep, and I'll call my contacts at the Pentagon. I'll go with you, I said. It's really not necessary. I want to, I said. She glanced at me and smiled. You don't trust me. It's not that, I said. But they might have questions. I could answer for them. Okay, fine. Good idea. Excellent idea. I felt sure that something was wrong. I felt as if I were in a play and everyone was acting a part. Except I didn't know what the play was. I glanced over at May. She was frowning slightly. She must have sensed it too. We passed through the airlocks into the residential unit. Here the air felt uncomfortably cold to me. I shivered. We went into the kitchen and Julia reached for the phone. Let's make that call, Jack, she said. I went to the refrigerator and got a ginger ale. May had an iced tea. Bobby had a beer. We were all thirsty. I noticed a bottle of champagne sitting in the fridge, waiting. I touched it. It was cold. There were 6 glasses in there too, being chilled. She'd already planned the party. Julia pushed the speakerphone button. We heard a dial tone. She punched in a number, but the call didn't go through. The line just went dead. Huh, she said. Let's try that again. She dialed a second time. Again, the call failed to go through. That's funny, Ricky. I'm not getting an outside line. Try run my time, Ricky said. I sipped my ginger ale and watched them. There was no question that this was all an act, a performance for our benefit. Julia dutifully dialed a third time. I wondered what number she was calling, or did she know the number for the Pentagon by heart? She said. Nothing. Ricky picked up the phone, looked at the base, put it down again. Should be okay, he said, acting puzzled. Oh, for Christ's sake, I said. Let me guess. Something has happened and we can't dial out. No, we can, Ricky said. I was just calling a few minutes ago, Julia said. Just before you got back. Ricky pushed away from the table. I'll check the comm lines. You do that, I said, glowering. Julia was staring at me. Jack, she said, I'm worried about you. You're angry. I'm being fucked with. I promise you, she said quietly, meeting my eyes. You're not. May got up from the table, saying she was going to take a shower. Bobby wandered into the lounge to play a video game, his usual way to unwind. Soon I heard the sound of machine gun fire, and the cries of dead bad guys. Julie and I were alone in the kitchen. She leaned over the table towards me. She spoke in a low, earnest voice. Jack, she said, I think I owe you an explanation. No, I said, you don't. I mean, for my behavior, my decisions these past days. It doesn't matter. It does to me. Maybe later, Julia. I need to tell you now. You see, the thing is, I just wanted to save the company, Jack. That's all. The camera failed and we couldn't fix it. We lost our contract and the company was falling apart. I've never lost a company before. I never had one shot out from underneath me. And I didn't want Zymos to be the first. I was invested, I had a stake in, and I guess I had my pride. I want to save it. I know I didn't use good judgment. I was desperate. It's nobody else's fault. They all wanted to stop it. I pushed them to go on. It was my crusade, she shrugged. And it was all for nothing. The company's going to fold in a matter of days. I've lost it. She leaned closer. But I don't want to lose you too. I don't want to lose my family. I don't want to lose us. She dropped her voice lower and stretched her hand across the table to cover mine. I want to make amends, Jack. I want to make things right and get us back on track again. She paused. I hope you do too. I said, I'm not sure how I feel. You're tired. Yes, but I'm not sure anymore. You mean about us? I said, I hate this fucking conversation. And I did. I hated that she would start this when I was exhausted. When I had just gone through an ordeal that nearly got me killed. And that was ultimately all her doing. I hated that she dismissed her involvement as bad judgment, when it was considerably worse than that. Oh, Jack, let's go back to the way we were, she said, and suddenly she leaned to the rest of the way across the table and tried to kiss me on the lips. I pulled back, turned my head away. She stared at me, eyes pleading. Jack, please. This is not the time or the place, Julia, I said. A pause. She didn't know what to say. Finally, the kids miss you. I'm sure they do. I miss them too. She burst into tears. And they don't miss me, she sobbed. They don't even care about me. About their mother. She reached for my hand again. I let her hold it. I tried to take stock of my feelings. I just felt tired and very uncomfortable. I wanted her to stop crying, Julia. The intercom clicked. I heard Ricky's voice amplified. Hey guys, we have a problem with the comm lines. You better come here right away. The comm rooms consisted of a large closet in one corner of the maintenance room. It was sealed with a heavy security door, with a small tempered glass window set in the upper half. Through this window I could see all the wiring panels and switch racks for the telecommunications in the lab. I also saw that great chunks of wiring had been yanked out and slumped in a corner of the closet. I saw Charlie Davenport. He appeared to be dead. His mouth hung open. His eyes stared into space. His skin was purple-gray. A black buzzing swarm swirled around his head. I can't imagine how this happened, Ricky was saying. He was fast asleep when I checked on him. When was that? I said. Maybe half an hour ago. And the swarm? How'd it get there? I can't imagine, Ricky said. He must have carried it with him from outside. How? I said. He went through all the airlocks. I know, but Ricky, how is it possible? Maybe, I don't know. Maybe it was in his throat or something. In his throat, I said. You mean just hanging out between his tonsils? These things kill you, you know. Yeah, I know. Of course I know. He shrugged. Beats me. I stared at Ricky, trying to understand his demeanor. He had just discovered that his lab was invaded by a lethal nanoswarm, and he didn't appear to be upset at all. He was talking it all very carefully. May came hurrying into the room. She took in the situation with a glance. Did anyone check the video playback? We can't, Ricky said. He pointed to the closet. The controls are disabled in there. So you don't know how he got in there? No, but he evidently didn't want us calling out. At least that's how it looks. May said, Why would Charlie go in there? I shook my head. I had no idea. Julia said, It's airtight. Maybe he knew he was infected and wanted to seal himself off. I mean, he locked the door from the inside. I said, He did. How do you know that? Julia said, I just assumed, She peered through the glass, and, you can see the lock reflected in that chrome fitting. See that one there? I didn't bother to look, but May did, and I heard her say, Oh, yes, Julia, you're right. Good observation. I missed that myself. It sounded very phony, but Julia didn't seem to react. So everybody was play acting now. Everything was staged, and I didn't understand why. But as I watched May with Julia, I noticed that she was being extremely careful with my wife, almost as if she was afraid of her, or at least afraid of offending her. That was odd, and a little alarming. I said to Ricky, "Is there a way to unlock the door?" "I think so. Vince probably has a skeleton key, but nobody's unlocking that door now, Jack. Not as long as that swarm is in there." "So we can't call anywhere," I said. "We are stuck here, incommunicado. Until tomorrow, yes. Helicopter will be back tomorrow morning on its regular run." Ricky peered in through the glass at the destruction. "Geez, Charlie, really did a job on those switching panels." I said, "Why do you think he would do that?" Ricky shook his head. "Charlie was a little crazy, you know. I mean, he was colorful, but all that farting and humming. He was a few flies short of a Happy Meal, Jack." "I never thought so. Just my opinion," he said. I stood beside Ricky and looked through the glass. The swarm was buzzing around Charlie's head, and I was starting to see the milky coating form on his body, the usual pattern. I said, "What about pumping liquid nitrogen in there, freezing the swarm?" "We could probably do that," Ricky said, "but I'm afraid we'd damage the equipment." "Can you turn the air handlers up enough to suck the particles out?" "Handlers are going full bore now, and you wouldn't want to use a fire extinguisher." He shook his head. "Extinguishers are halon. Won't affect the particles. So we're effectively kept out of that room. Far as I can tell, yes. Cell phones?" He shook his head. "Antennas route through that room. Every form of communications we have, cells, internet, high-speed data trunks, everything goes through that room." Julia said, "Charlie knew that room was airtight. I bet he went there to protect the rest of us. It was a selfless act, a courageous act." She was developing her theory about Charlie, fleshing it out, adding details. It was a little distracting, considering the main problem was still unanswered. "How to unlock the door and disable the storm," I said. "Is there another window in that closet?" "No. This window in the door is the only one." "Yes." "Okay then," I said. "Let's black out the window and turn the lights out in there, and wait a few hours until the swarm loses power." "Geez, I don't know," Ricky said doubtfully. "What do you mean, Ricky?" Julia said. "I think it's a great idea. It's certainly worth a try. Let's do it right now." "Okay, fine," Ricky said, immediately deferring to her. "But you're going to have to wait 6 hours." I said, "I thought it was 3 hours." "It is, but I want extra hours before I open that door. If that swarm gets loose in here, we've all had it." In the end, that was what we decided to do. We got black cloth and taped it over the window, and put black cardboard over that. We turned off the lights and taped the light switch in the off position. At the end of that time, exhaustion hit me again. I looked at my watch. It was 1 o'clock in the morning. I said, I have to go to bed. We should all get some sleep, Julia said. We can revisit this in the morning. We all headed off toward the residence module. May sidled up alongside me. How are you feeling? She said. Okay, my back's starting to hurt a little. She nodded. You better let me take a look at it. Why? Just let me take a look, before you go to bed. Oh, Jack, darling, Julia cried. You poor baby. What is it? I was sitting on the kitchen table with my shirt off. Julia and May were behind me, clucking. What is it? I said again. There's some blistering, May said. Blistering, Julia said. His whole back is covered. I think we have dressings, May said, interrupting her, reaching for the first aid kit beneath the sink. Yes, I hope so, Julia smiled at me. Jack, I can't tell you how sorry I am that you had to go through this. This may sting a little, May said. I knew that May wanted to talk to me alone, but there was no opportunity. Julia was not going to leave us alone for a minute. She had always been jealous of May, even years ago when I first hired May in the company, and now she was competing with her for my attention. I wasn't flattered. The dressings were cool at first, as May applied them, but within moments they stung bitterly. I winced. I don't know what painkillers we have, May said. You've got a good area of second-degree burns. Julia rummaged frantically through the first aid kit, tossing cartons out right and left. Tubes and canisters clattered to the floor. There's morphine, she said at last, holding up a bottle. She smiled at me brightly. That should do it. I don't want morphine, I said. What I really wanted to say was that I wanted her to go to bed. Julia was annoying me. The frantic edge was getting on my nerves, and I wanted to talk to May alone. There's nothing else, Julia said, except aspirin. Aspirin is fine. I'm worried it won't be. Aspirin is fine. You don't have to bite my head off. I'm sorry, I don't feel well. Well, I'm only trying to help, Julia stepped back. I mean, if you two want to be alone, you should just say so. No, I said. We do not want to be alone. Well, I am only trying to help. She turned back to the medicine kit. Maybe there is something else. Containers of tape and plastic bottles of antibiotics fell to the floor. Julia said, Please stop. What am I doing? What am I doing that is so awful? Just stop. I'm only trying to help. I know that. Behind me, May said, Okay, I'll finish now. That should hold you until tomorrow. She yawned. And now, if you don't mind, I'm going to bed. I thanked her and watched her leave the room. When I turned back, Julia was holding a glass of water and 2 aspirins for me. Thank you, I said. I never liked that woman, she said. Let's get some sleep, I said. There's only single beds here. I know. She moved closer. I like to be with you, Jack. I'm really tired. I'll see you in the morning, Julia. I went back to my room and looked at the bed. I didn't bother taking off my clothes. I don't remember my head touching the pillow. Day 7, 4:42 a.m. I slept restlessly, with constant and terrible dreams. I dreamed that I was back in Monterey, marrying Julia again, and I was standing in front of the minister. When she came up alongside me in her bridal gown, and when she lifted the veil, I was shocked by how beautiful and young and slender she was. She smiled at me, and I smiled back, trying to conceal my uneasiness, because now I saw she was more than slender. Her face was thin, almost emaciated, almost a skull. Then I turned to the minister in front of us, but it was May, and she was pouring colored liquids back and forth in test tubes. When I looked back at Julia, she was very angry and said she never liked that woman. Somehow it was my fault. I was to blame. I woke up briefly, sweating. The pillow was soaked. I turned it over and went back to sleep. I saw myself sleeping on the bed, and I looked up and saw that the door to my room was opened. Light came in from the hallway outside. A shadow fell across my bed. Ricky came into the room and looked down at me. His face was backlit and dark. I couldn't see his expression, but he said, "I always loved you, Jack." He leaned over to whisper something in my ear, and I realized as his head came down that he was going to kiss me instead. He was going to kiss me on the lips, passionately. His mouth was open. His tongue licked his lips. I was very upset. I didn't know what to do. But at that moment, Julia came in and said, "What's going on?" And Ricky hastily pulled away and made some kind of evasive comment. Julia was very angry and said, "Not now, you fool." And Ricky made another evasive comment. And then Julia said, "This is completely unnecessary. It will take care of itself." And Ricky said, "There are constrictions coefficients for deterministic algorithms if you do interval global optimization." And she said, "It won't hurt you if you don't fight it." She turned on the light in the room and walked out. Then I was suddenly back in my Monterey wedding. Julia was standing beside me in white, and I turned to look back at the audience. And I saw my 3 kids sitting in the first row, smiling and happy. And as I watched, a black line appeared around their mouths and stripped down their bodies until they were cloaked in black. They continued to smile, but I was horrified. I ran to them, but I couldn't rub the black cloak off. And Nicole said calmly, "Don't forget the sprinklers, Dad." I woke up, tangled up in the sheets, drenched in sweat. The door to my room was open. A rectangle of light fell across my bed. From the hallway outside, I looked over at the workstation monitor. It said 4:55 a.m. I closed my eyes and lay there for a while, but I couldn't go back to sleep. I was wet and uncomfortable. I decided to take a shower. Shortly before 5 in the morning, I got out of bed. The hallway was silent. I walked down the corridor to the bathrooms. The doors to all the bedrooms were open, which seemed strange. I could see everybody sleeping as I walked past, and the lights were on in all the bedrooms. I saw Ricky asleep, and I saw Bobby, and I saw Julia and Vince. May's bed was empty, and of course Charlie's bed was empty. I stopped in the kitchen to get a ginger ale from the refrigerator. I was very thirsty, my throat painful and parched, and my stomach felt a little queasy. I looked at the champagne bottle. I suddenly had a funny feeling about it, as if it might have been tampered with. I took it out and looked closely at the cap, at the metal foil that covered the cork. It looked entirely normal. No tampering, no needle marks, no nothing. Just a bottle of champagne. I put it back and closed the refrigerator door. I began to wonder if I had been unfair to Julia. Maybe she really did believe she'd made a mistake and wanted to put things right. Maybe she just wanted to show her gratitude. Maybe I was being too tough on her, too unforgiving. Because when you thought about it, what had she done that was suspicious or wrong? She'd been glad to see me, even if she was over the top. She'd accepted responsibility for the experiment, and she'd apologized for it. She immediately agreed to make the call to the army. She'd agreed with my plan to kill the swarm in the comm room. She'd done everything she could do to show she supported me and was on my side. But I still was uneasy. And of course, there was the matter of Charlie and his swarm. Ricky's idea that Charlie had somehow been carrying the swarm inside his body, in his mouth or under his armpit or something, didn't make a lot of sense to me. Those swarms killed within seconds. So it left a question. How did the swarm get into the comm room with Charlie? Did it get in from outside? Why hadn't it attacked Julia and Ricky and Vince? I forgot about my shower. I decided to go down to the utility room and look around outside the comm room door. Maybe there was something I had missed. Julia had been talking a lot, interrupting my train of thought, almost as if she hadn't wanted me to figure something out. There I was again, being hard on Julia. I went through the airlock, down the corridor, through another airlock. When you were tired, it was annoying to have that wind blowing on you. I came out into the utility area and went towards the comm room door. I didn't notice anything. I heard the sound of a clicking keyboard and looked into the biology lab. May was there at her workstation. I said, "What are you doing?" "Checking the video playback." "I thought we couldn't do that because Charlie pulled the wires." "That's what Ricky said, but it isn't true." I started to come around the lab bench to look over her shoulder. She held up her hand. "Jack," she said, "maybe you don't want to look at this." "What? Why not? It's Maybe you don't want to deal with this, not right now, maybe tomorrow. But of course, after that, I practically ran around the table to see what was on her monitor. And I stopped. What I saw on her screen was an image of an empty corridor, with a time code at the bottom of the picture. Is this it? I said. Is this what I should deal with? No. She turned in her chair. Look, Jack. You have to go through all the security cameras in sequence, and each one only records 10 frames a minute. So it's very difficult to be sure of what we're... Just show me, May. I have to go back a bit. She pressed the back button in the corner of the keyboard repeatedly. Like many new control systems, the Zymo systems was modeled on internet browser technology. You could go backward in work, retracing your steps. The frames jumped backwards until she came to the place she wanted. Then she ran it forward. The security images jumping from one camera to the next in rapid succession. A corridor, the main plant, another angle of the plant, an airlock. Another corridor, the utility room. A corridor, the kitchen, the lounge. The residence hallway, an exterior view looking down at the floodlit desert. Corridor, the power room, the outside ground level. Another corridor. I blinked. How long have you been doing this? About an hour. Jesus. Next I saw a corridor. Ricky moving down it. Power station outside, looking down on Julia stepping into the floodlight. A corridor. Julia and Ricky together, embracing. And then a corridor, and wait, I said. I hit a button. She looked at me, said nothing. She pressed another key, flicked the image forward slowly. She stopped on the camera that showed Ricky and Julia, 10 frames. The movement was blurred and jerky. Ricky and Julia moved toward each other. They embraced. There was a clear sense of ease, of familiarity between them. And then they kissed passionately. Ah, shit, I said, turning away from the screen. Shit. I'm sorry, Jack, May said. I don't know what to say. I felt a wave of dizziness, almost as if I might collapse. I sat down on the table. I kept my body turned away from the screen. I just couldn't look. I took a deep breath. May was saying something more, but I didn't hear her words. I took another breath. I ran my hand through my hair. I said, "Did you know about this?" "No, not until a few minutes ago." "Did anybody?" "No. We used to joke about it sometimes, that they had a relationship, but none of us believed it." Jesus. I ran my hands through my hair again. "Tell me the truth, May. I need to hear the truth. Did you know about this or not?" "No, Jack, I didn't." Silence. I took a breath. I tried to take stock of my feelings. "You know what's funny?" I said. "What's funny is that I've suspected this for a while now. I mean, I was pretty sure it was happening. I just didn't know who. I mean, even though I expected it, it's still kind of a shock. I'm sure. I never would have figured Ricky," I said. "He's such a, I don't know, smarmy kind of guy. And he's not a big power guy. Somehow, I would have thought she'd pick someone more important. I guess. As I said it, I remembered my conversation with Ellen after dinner. Are you so sure about Julia's style? That was after I'd seen the guy in the car. The guy's face I couldn't really make out. Ellen, it's called Denial, Jack. Jesus, I said, shaking my head. I felt angry, embarrassed, confused, furious. It kept changing every second. May waited. She didn't move or speak. She was completely still. Finally she said, "Do you want to see any more? Is there more?" "Yes. I don't know if No, I don't want to see any more." "Maybe you better." "No. I mean, it might make you feel better." "I don't think so," I said. "I don't think I can take it," she said. "It may not be what you think, Jack. At least it may not be exactly what you think." "It's called denial, Jack. Sorry, May," I said. "But I don't want to pretend anymore. I saw it. I know what it is." I thought I'd be with Julia forever. I thought we loved the kids together. We had a family, a house, a life together. And Ricky had a new baby of his own. It just was weird. It didn't make sense to me. But then things never turn out the way you think they will. I heard May typing quickly on the keyboard. I turned, so I could see her, but not the screen. "What are you doing?" "Trying to find Charlie. See if I can track what happened to him over the last few hours." She continued typing. I took a breath. She was right. Whatever was going on in my personal life was already well advanced. There was nothing I could do about it. At least not right now. I turned all the way around and faced the screen. "Okay," I said. "Let's look for Charlie." It was disorienting to watch the camera images flash by repeating this in sequence. People popped in and out of images. I saw Julia in the kitchen. The next time I saw her and Ricky in the kitchen. The refrigerator door was open, then shut. I saw Vince in the main plant room. Then he popped out. I saw him in the corridor, then gone. I don't see Charlie. "Maybe he's still asleep," May said. "Can you see in the bedrooms?" "Yes, there are cameras there. But I have to change security cycles. Ordinary cycle doesn't go into the bedrooms." "How big a deal is it to change the security cycle?" "I'm not sure. This is really Ricky's area. The system here is pretty complicated. Ricky's the only one who really knows how to work it. Let's see if we find Charlie in the regular cycle." So that's what we did, waiting to see if he appeared in any of the standard camera images. We searched for about 10 minutes more. From time to time, I had to look away from the images, though it never seemed to bother May. But sure enough, we saw him in the residential hallway, walking down the corridor, rubbing his face. He'd just woken up. "Okay," May said. "We got him." "What's the time?" She froze the image so we could read it. It was 12:10 a.m. I said, "That's only about a half an hour before we got back." "Yes." She ran the images forward. Charlie disappeared from the hallway, but we saw him briefly heading into the bathroom. Then we saw Ricky and Julia in the kitchen. I felt my body tense, but they were just talking. Then Julia put the champagne in the refrigerator, and Ricky started handing her glasses to put in beside the bottle. It was difficult to be sure what happened next because of the frame rate. 10 frames a minute of video meant that you only got an image every 6 seconds. So events appeared blurred and jumpy when things moved fast, because too much happened between the frames. But this is what I thought happened. Charlie showed up and began talking to the two of them. He was smiling, cheerful. He pointed to the glasses. Julie and Ricky put the glasses away while they talked to him. Then he held up his hand to stop. He pointed to a glass that Julia was holding in her hand before she put it in the refrigerator. He said something. Julia shook her head and put the glass in the refrigerator. Charlie seemed puzzled. He pointed again to another glass. Julia shook her head. Then Charlie hunched his shoulders and thrust out his chin, as if he was getting angry. He poked the table repeatedly with his finger, making a point. Ricky stepped forward between Julia and Charlie. He acted like someone's interrupting an argument. He held his hand up soothingly to Charlie. Take it easy. Charlie wasn't taking it easy. He was pointing to the sink, heaped with unwashed dishes. Ricky shook his head and put his hand on Charlie's shoulder. Charlie brushed it off. The two men began to argue. Meanwhile, Julia calmly put the rest of the glasses into the refrigerator. She seemed indifferent to the argument, a few feet from her, almost as if she didn't hear it. Charlie was trying to get around Ricky to the refrigerator, but Ricky kept moving to block him and held his hands up each time. Ricky's whole demeanor suggested that he did not regard Charlie as rational. He was treating Charlie in that careful way you do when someone's out of control. May said, "Is Charlie being affected by the storm? Is that why he's acting that way? I can't tell." I looked closer at the screen. "I don't see any storm." "No," she said, "but he is pretty angry." "What does he want them to do?" I said. May shook her head. "Put the glasses back? Wash them? Use different glasses? I can't tell." I said, "Charlie doesn't care about that stuff. He'd eat out of a dirty plate somebody else had used." I smiled. "I've seen him do it." Suddenly, Charlie stepped several paces back. For a moment, he was completely still, as if he had discovered something that stunned him. Ricky said something to him. Charlie began pointing and shouting at both of them. Ricky tried to approach him. Charlie kept backing away, and then he turned to the phone, mounted on the wall. He lifted the receiver. Ricky came forward very quickly, his body a blur, and slammed the phone down. He shoved Charlie back hard. Ricky's strength was surprising. Charlie was a big guy, but he went down to the floor and skidded backward a few feet. Charlie got to his feet, continued to yell. Then he turned and ran out of the room. Julia and Ricky exchanged a glance. Julia said something to him. Immediately, Ricky ran after Charlie. Julia ran after Ricky. "Where are they going?" I said. The screen flashed, updating time. And then we started seeing images from all the cameras again, in sequence. We saw Charlie running down a corridor, and we saw Ricky start after him. We waited impatiently for the next cycle, but nobody was visible there. Another cycle. Then we saw Charlie in the utility room, dialing the phone. He glanced over his shoulder. A moment later, Ricky came in and Charlie hung up the phone. They argued, circling around each other. Charlie picked up a shovel and swung it at Ricky. The first time Ricky dodged away. The second time it caught him on the shoulder and knocked him to the floor. Charlie swung the shovel over his head and slammed it down on Ricky's head. The gesture was brutal, the intentions clearly murderous. Ricky managed to duck back just as the shovel smashed onto the concrete. "My God," Mace said. Ricky was getting to his feet when Charlie turned and saw Julia enter the room. Julia held out her hand, pleading with Charlie to put down the shovel. Charlie looked from one of them to the other, and then Vince entered the room too. Now that they were all in the room, he seemed to lose his urge to fight. They were circling him, closing in. Suddenly, Charlie dashed for the comm room, stepped inside and tried to shut the door behind him. Ricky was on him in a flash. He had his foot in the door, and Charlie couldn't get it closed. Charlie's face looked angry through the glass. Vince came right alongside Ricky, with both of them at the door. I couldn't see what was happening. Julia seemed to be giving orders. I thought I saw her reach her hand through the crack in the door, but it was difficult to be sure. In any case, the door opened and both Vince and Ricky entered the room. The action that came next was swift, blurred on the video, but apparently the three men were fighting, and Ricky managed to get behind Charlie and get him in a hammerlock. Vince pulled Charlie's arm behind his back, and together the two men subdued Charlie. He stopped fighting. The image was less blurred. "What's happening?" May said. "They never told us any of this." Ricky and Vance were holding Charlie from behind. Charlie was panting, his chest heaving, but he no longer struggled. Julia came into the room. She looked at Charlie, had some conversation with him, and then Julia walked up to Charlie and kissed him full on and long on the lips. Charlie struggled, tried to wrench away. Vince grabbed a fistful of Charlie's hair and tried to hold his head steady. Julia continued to kiss him. Then she stepped away, and as she did, I saw a river of black between her mouth and Charlie's. It was only there for a moment, and then it faded. "Oh my God," May said. Julia wiped her lips and smiled. Charlie sagged, dropped to the ground. He appeared dazed. A black cloud came out of his mouth and swirled around his head. Vince patted him on the head and left the room. Ricky went over to the panels and pulled out wiring by the handful. He literally ripped the panels apart. Then he turned back to Charlie, said something else, and walked out of the comms room. At once, Charlie sprang to his feet, closed the door, and locked it. But Ricky and Julia just laughed, as if this was a futile gesture. Charlie sagged again, and from then on, he was out of sight. Ricky threw his arm around Julia's shoulder, and they walked out of the room together. "Well, you two are certainly up bright and early." I turned. Julia was standing in the doorway.